This is a BF Goodrich KO3. This is also a BF Goodrich KO3. So the question is, why are they totally different?
This question took me down a pretty good rabbit hole that exposes some pretty shocking differences in tire companies' design processes and underlying science.
You're gonna wanna stick around for this because it gets pretty interesting and it might change the way you shop for tires. So this is a real email that I got from a real tire company. It's a budget tire company and they reached out to ask me if I would like to co-develop with them a new tread pattern for their all-terrain tire. I, of course, replied that I was not interested. See, I know a fair amount about tires, which means I know enough to understand that tread patterns take years to develop. It takes years of testing to get it right. And you need people that have degrees in things like physics and material science. What you don't need on your development team is a YouTuber to shill your inferior product and your possibly dangerous product to the public. Okay, so this leads us to those mismatched KO3s. Actually, before we go there, I don't know if anybody else is doing this much research to create tire reviews on YouTube. Do me a favor, this is definitely not a sponsored video. Just subscribe to the channel, share these videos with your friends. We're on a path to try to get to 100,000 by the end of the year. I have no idea if we'll make it, but we put an insane amount of research and time into these videos, and I would appreciate the support. Okay, so what in the world is going on with the KO3? If you're a tire nerd, this is amazing. We are getting insight into the design process of a tire that normally happens behind closed doors and curtains. We never get to see this stuff. And the thing is, nobody's talking about it. Let's just set the scene here. We have the old KO2 right here. We have a KO3. This KO3 is one of the original equipment KO3s that shipped quite a while ago, like almost 2 years ago. These things were shipping on only a couple vehicles from the manufacturer. This is a KO3 and I noticed they're not the same at all. And then all of a sudden, I started to understand why. First of all, if you want to understand the difference between the KO2 and the KO3, I already did a review on that. And I will just give you the very, very fast high bullet notes or bullet points. This is a better tire than the old KO2 for a lot of reasons. They definitely changed the compound. So just the rubber itself has changed a lot. But the entire process for manufacturing this tire has completely changed. They have all new molds. They have new extruders. And you go, well, okay, what does that mean? Well, the thing is, they upgraded their machines a lot, like the leading machines on the market that really almost nobody else has access to right now. Very few companies do. And what that changed was things like uniformity. So there was always the talk of the old KO2 where it was hard to balance. Well, that's one of the reasons they moved to the new types of machines that they have. They have sectional molds. They've had sectional molds for a long time, but they have new sectional molds and they have molds that are ventless instead of vented and all these types of things. These are all little tiny incremental changes that help the tire be more uniform, be more reliable, to be able to spit it out where they can count on the fact that they're all gonna be the same or the way that they're supposed to be to spec. So a lot of changes happen that people don't understand. The machines that make this changed and that made it a better tire fundamentally, okay? The other thing is this tire was out for a long time and everybody knew the complaints. Hey, it's bad in mud, it's bad in snow, it's bad on wet roads. It's not terrible in snow, it's just there's better ones out there, right? So they decided to go after some of those issues as well. So some of those things was obviously they added more siping. It's got about 20 to 25% more siping, okay? These are the little lines that you can see in it. Like this one has 3, similar lug, now has 5. So they added a ton more siping. That's fantastic. That's gonna help us in wet roads. It's gonna help in the snow. Now, there's more things that they did. The pattern on the middle of the tire is actually tighter. It's less voided, which means your contact patch with the road is stronger than ever. So you have fantastic dry traction. Also, a tighter pattern in the center of your tire means that the tire doesn't wear as fast, so you can get a longer mileage warranty, and it's a tougher tire. So these are some of the things that they changed. Now, that was one of the things where everybody panicked. They went, oh, it's less voided in the middle of the tire. That means it's gonna be even worse in mud. And there was a lot of talk about mud performance. Now, they did change things on the shoulder to help with mud a little bit on this OE tire. But that's where all of a sudden we have to talk about this tire. What in the world is this tire? And why is this tire so much different than this one? It may look the same, but we're gonna start zooming in and I'm gonna start highlighting some of the differences. Okay, so let's talk fundamentally just what changed, the obvious stuff and looks, and then we'll talk about why. Let's jump into this. So first of all, you can always recognize the original equipment tire, the OE tire, because this middle tread block always looks like an S. There it is, there's all the S's. If you jump over to the new wide release KO3, it's back to more of like a caterpillar looking design in the middle. No more S in the middle. So let's talk the OE. We look at it, we have the S. You have all the additional siping compared to the original KO2. That's great. Guess what? This one does as well. So obviously they're taking snow and wet weather seriously. But we have that change there. What else changed? If you look at the lugs on the side wall, every other one, this one bumps out, this one goes in. On the new one, where they bump out farther. So that's a pretty obvious change. The sidewall is a little bit more aggressive. It's the same design, it just extrudes farther. Another change that you're gonna notice is, remember the S? Look at this S. If you look down in the groove around the S, it's not attached to anything, as in it's not attached to any other lugs. It's its own lug. Look at the S's on the new one. The new one, it's very hard to see. There you go. It's actually attached to this lug. It's reinforced between here and here. It's also reinforced right down here. Significantly reinforced, actually. So this whole thing from here to here to here becomes one big super lug that's reinforcing each other and strengthening the center of that tire. So what does that mean and why did they do that? Okay, so a lot of the changes that we're talking about on this tire are in a response to some changes on the market. And that is that vehicles are getting heavier, especially with electric vehicles. And vehicles also have a lot more power than they used to. And when we're talking power, it's not so much the horsepower that's the problem, it's the torque that is the problem. If you talk to some diesel guys that have been around for a long time that are tuning their trucks and hauling really, really heavy loads, they are very aware of this problem. It's existed for a long time, but now you're starting to see vehicles that aren't super tuned that are having the same problem because vehicles are getting so much more powerful and so much more heavy. On a really heavy vehicle that has a lot of torque, you start to see wear patterns in the center of the tire. It basically just chews the tire up. You end up having things like cupping and uneven wear in the middle of the tire. And the thing that's even more confusing is it doesn't do it on all four of your tires. It tends to only do it on your rear tire. So think about the changes that we just talked about on this tire. The middle S on this one is not reinforced. Well, that's okay. This was an original equipment tire. This thing's going on things like a Ford Raptor Ranger. It's not towing tons and tons of weight. It's a perfectly adequate tire for that application. If you're gonna go stick this on a massive Dodge Cummins with a tune that's gonna pull a massive trailer, all of a sudden it matters that that center lug is reinforced. So they added reinforcement to the center of the tire. So you're not just peeling those center lugs back and wrecking the middle of your tire when you're towing heavy loads. This makes this a more viable tire from the top to the bottom of the market. Yes, it can still work on a 4Runner. It's still gonna be fantastic there, but also it can work on your bigger trucks now, which is pretty cool. But Nathan, what about the biggest complaint on this tire? What about mud performance? Well, let's take a look at that. So it turns out when you get a mud tire, even a really good mud tire, you almost always clog up the center of your tread with mud, especially when you're in that like really, really goopy clay. The reality is most of your traction in really, really bad mud situations is coming from the outsides of your tire. It's It's coming from this section and this section. And what's interesting is from this tire to this tire, they actually changed a lot to add better mud performance. One thing that's super slight that almost nobody will notice is that these little guys, these little fins that are down in between the tread, these guys are more pronounced now. And they even have a little sharper angles on them. What this does is when mud tries to stick to the middle of your tire, it creates where you end up having a little air bubble down along that ridge. And that little air bubble causes just enough separation with the mud that this section is able to continually chuck mud out of it. So these ridges were enhanced to help with mud ejection. The other thing that happened is it's slightly more voided. From here to here, they've created bigger gaps than on this tire. So they did some more work to help with mud there. The other thing they did is they gave it that more aggressive sidewall. These lugs now stick out farther than they used to. They even added these little notches into every other block to just continue to try to give the very edge of your tire more grip and more to work with. You notice those aren't there on this tire. Okay, so what does this all mean, and why do I personally just think that this is really cool to have these insights? The main thing is the KO2, it's one of the most successful AT tires ever in history. It really kind of wasn't that broken, yet they decided to come out with one that was better. And they did give us one that was better. This OE tire was a better version of the KO2. It's just a fundamentally better tire. But they didn't stop there. Their process for continuous improvement was still going on before they released it to the public. And they still made multiple additional changes and iterations. They tested those. They actually measure those with real science to find out that this one is a percentage X better than this one at snow and ice and all these different things. They keep working to improve the tire for the general public. We don't give some of these companies, and I'm not only talking about BFG, there are several good tire companies out there that each have expertise in different things. I'm a huge fan of Mickey Thompson's. I'm a huge fan of Falcons. I'm a huge fan of Coopers and all kinds of different tires that I get to play with all the time because I don't sign exclusive agreements with any of these guys, so I can keep testing more and more tires. But the thing is, I respect that they actually came out with a better tire and they didn't quit there. They kept working and they came out with an even better tire. They could have got away with this tire. The public would have accepted it, the public would have liked it, the public would have noticed that it was a better tire. This is what real tire companies are doing, and thankfully we have several good real tire companies that we can buy tires from. The other tire companies, some of these bargain basement deal tire companies, they're sending emails to me, and they want us to draw out a cool looking tread pattern that we all hope is cool enough that consumers will be dumb enough to go buy it. Even though there's very little science, there's very little continuous improvement, and there's very little testing that goes into these things. So don't get tricked by those tires. I know they're cheaper, but they probably won't last half as long. So by the time you're doubling the price of them, they're probably not that good of a deal. And some of them are even worse than that. And the bigger problem is some of them are just not very safe in general. So if you're gonna be an off-roader, or even if you're just using these for the job site, or you're just using it to drive your family around, I'm not telling you to go buy the BFG KO3. I'm saying learn from this process. It's so cool to get a little bit of insight behind the curtains and see how hard some smart people at some company are working to try to continually make a product better, to make it work for a wider variety of vehicles, to make it work for light vehicles and heavy vehicles, to make it work off-road and on-road. Be smart, be safe, buy good products. They're worth it.